In a race against time, the fate of a Russian submarine hangs perilously in the balance. A recent report reveals that a serious malfunction has rendered the Novorossiysk effectively stranded in the Mediterranean, with crew members' lives on the line. What shocking secrets lie beneath the surface? The crisis unfolds as the Russian telegram channel VCHKOGPU leaks grim details. According to sources, the fuel system has suffered catastrophic damage, resulting in a perilous diesel leak into the hold. The situation worsens, no spare parts exist for repairs, and the crew lacks the expertise required to rectify the problem. Sounds of creaking metal fill the air, the smell of diesel lingers like a haunting specter, emphasizing the urgency. While there's a small comfort, the diesel's flashpoint is a relatively high 140 degrees Fahrenheit, this doesn't completely eliminate the risk. Sparks or flames could ignite disaster in an instant. The reality sinks in: if the fuel ignites, a blaze would rage unchecked until the submarine is a sunken grave, drowned beneath the waves. Sealing the hold might provide a temporary respite from the leak, but it's not without its own dangers. Anyone venturing inside would be met with dizzying fumes, leading to headaches and debilitating weakness. What horror awaits those who take that fateful step? The threat of coma and serious health issues looms if they cannot contain the leaks. But will they act in time? The critical question confronts the crew: can they manage this disaster before it's too late? The clock is ticking, and the stakes couldn't be higher. If they fail, what price will they pay? The atmosphere thickens with tension, and a haunting realization lingers: one wrong move could seal their fate before rescue even has a chance to arrive. Previously, we saw how the crew of the Novorossiysk submarine sealed off the cargo hold to stop dangerous fuel from leaking. But the air inside is toxic. Breathing diesel fumes can cause dizziness, headaches, and even drowsiness. Long exposure could lead to severe health problems. Now, the crew faces a terrifying new threat. High levels of diesel vapors can cause coma, loss of muscle control, and serious heart and lung damage. The Novorossiysk's crew must hope the fuel leak stays contained. If it spreads, these fumes could claim their lives faster than any fire could. But keeping the hold sealed might not solve the crisis. Reports from a covert Russian channel reveal a grim truth: the toxic fuel trapped inside the cargo hold is an explosive hazard on the brink of disaster. The crew may have no choice but to start pumping the fuel directly into the sea. This desperate act, harmful to the environment, means the submarine loses vital fuel needed to keep running. Worse yet, transferring flammable diesel risks igniting the fumes. A spark in the wrong place could trigger a deadly inferno aboard the vessel. Every moment grows more perilous. The Novorossiysk is a ticking bomb, stranded near the Mediterranean, right in NATO's backyard. What was meant to be a symbol of power now teeters on the edge of total ruin and humiliation for Russia. This isn't just a mechanical failure, it's a public defeat. For those who remember, it calls to mind the catastrophic Kursk disaster from 2000. Back then, a faulty torpedo propulsion system caused terrible explosions, sinking the Oscar II-class submarine and drowning all 118 souls inside. Putin's first year as president was forever stained by that tragedy. Could history repeat itself beneath these dark waters? The echoes of the past weigh heavily on the Novorossiysk's crew, and on Russia's pride. What fate awaits them as the fuel leak threatens to ignite at any moment? In a shocking twist, the Russian military's pride teeters on the brink as another submarine disaster unfolds. The Novorossiysk, a Kilo-class submarine, faces imminent doom in a perilous state near NATO's doorstep. Its plight raises the specter of past failures, echoing the Kursk tragedy that claimed 118 lives back in 2000. A faulty propulsion system was to blame for the Kursk's demise, and the echoes of that catastrophe resonate hauntingly today. When the Kursk sank, Russian President Vladimir Putin faced immense criticism for obstructing international rescue efforts, fearing exposure of military secrets. Fast forward to today, and Putin finds himself in a similarly dire situation. The Novorossiysk's fuel leak threatens not only its crew but potentially mirrors the tragic fate of the Kursk. Fuel is gushing into the hold, leaving the crew trapped with no experts to stem the leak. Is history about to repeat itself? What will Putin choose this time? Historically, he rejected Western assistance, driven by pride, especially now when Russia's relations with NATO are at an all-time low. He would rather risk his sailors' lives than appear weak. With the clock ticking and safety on the line, will he still deny aid? This isn't an isolated incident. Recently, another Russian vessel, the Vyshny Volokyak, sustained severe damage after colliding with a civilian tanker, citing combat tasks as the reason for its misfortune. Images reveal the hull's extensive damage, yet the military falsely claimed it remained battle-ready. The discrepancies in Russia's naval incidents expose vulnerabilities and raise eyebrows. How can they maintain a semblance of power when their fleet is crumbling? The Novorossiysk's current crisis begs the question, is this the beginning of the end for Russia's once feared naval prowess? As the Novorossiysk lurks in the Mediterranean, tensions rise. Time dwindles, and if the fuel ignites, chaos will descend. With every tick of the clock, the likelihood of disaster escalates. Will the crew find a way to avert catastrophe, or will history once again reveal the devastating consequences of negligence and pride? As the Vyshny Volokyak broke the surface, eyes widened at the visible damage to its hull. Russia's military, caught in a web of embarrassment, claimed the ship remained combat-ready, despite the visible signs of trouble. Their narrative spun a tale blaming Ukrainian drones for the mishap, a convenient illusion in the face of undeniable flaws. But the truth was far more troubling. The Novorossiysk, a vessel entrusted to safeguard Russian interests, was facing a crisis that echoed its troubled past. How could a submarine, meant to intimidate potentially hostile forces, suffer such negligence? With its diesel generators and electric drive, the Novorossiysk was capable of reaching a maximum underwater speed of 17 knots, an unimpressive feat for a submarine of its class. Its operational range of 6 to 7,500 nautical miles wasn't remarkable either. Yet, this submarine posed a significant threat, armed with 18 torpedoes and launch capabilities for missiles and mines. The Novorossiysk isn't a relic of a bygone Soviet era. Laid down on August 20, 2010, according to records from the Black Sea Fleet, it entered active service just 4 years later. At the time of its malfunction, the submarine had barely 11 years of operational history. During that time, Russia employed it effectively to send clear messages to NATO nations. It had just been deployed to the English Channel in June 2025, a potent reminder of Russia's naval ambitions. As it roamed those waters, it seemed to announce a bold presence, signaling to both France and the United Kingdom that Russian submarines could easily reach their shores. The British scrambled to respond, sending a patrol vessel, HMS Mersey, alongside helicopters to monitor this audacious maneuver. Ultimately, the Novorossiysk, escorted by the tugboat Yakov Grabelsky, navigated away without incident, yet this was merely a prelude to the disaster that awaited. Questions lingered in the air: how could such a crucial asset fall into disrepair? And what would happen when it was truly needed? Few could imagine the catastrophic failure looming just weeks away, a failure that would not only endanger lives but also shatter illusions of strength. As time crept on, the Novorossiysk, once a symbol of might, found itself on the brink of calamity deep in the Mediterranean. What awaited at sea? Would this be yet another chapter in a legacy of naval misfortune for Russia, echoing the devastating Kursk disaster? Or was it merely the beginning of a deeper, darker tale about to unfold? With tensions flaring and shadows growing, the echoes of past mistakes murmured a warning: history has a habit of repeating itself. In the shadowy depths of the Mediterranean, a storm brews over Russia's naval power. The Novorossiysk, a key submarine in Russia's arsenal, found itself in trouble unlike any it had faced before. This vessel, once a symbol of strength, now struggles for survival, raising eyebrows and questions. Was it truly operational, or was this deployment reckless disregard? As the submarine drifts dangerously, it becomes less of a threat and more of a ticking time bomb, mocked by the very waters it sought to command. The Novorossiysk surfacing was a puzzling spectacle, perceived as a bold message to NATO. Its sudden distress in such a strategic location is highly suspicious. No one could assume that a submarine on active duty would face catastrophic failure shortly after making such a statement. Did Russia genuinely believe in the vessel's reliability, or was it merely pushing its luck? Regardless, the consequences are dire as the Novorossiysk faces an imminent collapse. With the Mediterranean as its graveyard, Russia's unspoken humiliation looms larger. This incident paints a worrying picture of Russia's military capabilities. As the submarine bobbles in distress, it symbolizes the broader decay of Russia's navy. Maintenance issues, supply shortages, and aging technology plague the fleet. The inability to properly support their vessels highlights a deep vulnerability, exposing the cracks in Russia's maritime facade. In June 2024, another significant embarrassment struck when the Yazan M-class submarine, Kazan, docked in Havana, showing clear signs of wear and tear. The echoing clang of rusting metal and the sour scent of neglect permeated the air, further emphasizing the dire straits of Russia's naval forces. What could save the Novorossiysk remains uncertain. Time runs out as the crew battles a major fuel leak, risking fiery annihilation. If urgent repairs aren't made, this once-dreaded threat may soon sink quietly into the abyss, extinguished by its failures. The world watches, with NATO's eyes trained on this faltering giant, ready to capitalize on this extraordinary failure. Awaiting their fate in hostile waters, the crew faces a perilous dilemma. They must act quickly, but is it too late to save themselves? In the murky depths of the world's oceans, a chilling game of cat and mouse unfolds, casting a long shadow over global security. Russia's undersea prowess, boasting an arsenal of around 65 submarines, is supposed to be a formidable power. Yet, the facade is cracking. What happens when the predator becomes the prey? This tale begins with a Russian submarine, the Novorossiysk, which has found itself marooned in NATO's backyard, its once menacing presence now reduced to that of a drifting ghost. On September 28, whispers emerged from the Economic Times, revealing that the Novorossiysk, part of Russia's strategic Black Sea Fleet, was adrift in the Mediterranean due to a severe technical failure. What could have been a silent sentinel now suffers from a catastrophic fuel leak, leaving the crew of 52 on the brink of disaster. The vessel itself is a fragile shell, 242 feet of potential chaos, teetering on the edge of an explosive fate. Imagine the relentless tension aboard as they grapple with the ticking clock. Time is not just running out, it could spell doom. As the news spreads, analysts dive into the implications of this breakdown. With the Mediterranean swarming with NATO-aligned nations, a Russian loss here isn't just a logistical nightmare, it's an embarrassment of colossal proportions. With every passing moment, the potential for disaster looms larger. Could this malfunction ignite a situation spiraling out of control? What secrets lie behind the failed fuel systems, tantalizingly hinting at a dramatic historical echo? A telegram from the Russian channel, VCHKOGPU, intensifies the dread. Fuel is leaking directly into the hold, it states, a harrowing admission of vulnerability. This isn't merely an inconvenience, it's a lethal cocktail brewing in the bowels of their submarine. What will happen if the volatile mix of diesel meets a spark? The thoughts are as suffocating as the fumes, potent enough to cause eyes to water and heads to pound with the weight of impending tragedy. Seal off the hold, they instruct, and escape from disaster that may not grant the crew the safety they crave. The stench of fuel pervades the air, mingling with the faint odor of metal and salt water, a desperate reminder of their precarious position. The risk of ignition hangs heavy, palpable, as they contemplate the grim reality of their situation. The stakes escalate. The crew is faced with a dire choice: siphon the leaking fuel into the sea, potentially triggering an inferno in the process. A volatile gamble, one that not only jeopardizes their lives but also damages their strategic standings. Are they pawns in a game far too complicated to comprehend? Look around, this is no ordinary repair, this is a baptism by fire as they fight for their futures amid the echoes of past failures. As experts weigh in, implications ripple outward, revealing a deeper malaise within Russia's naval forces. The entirety of their navy stretches thin, frayed by the toll of prolonged conflict in Ukraine. One fleet's misfortune only amplifies the challenge, while the dream of snatching victory appears increasingly distant. Should the Novorossiysk succumb to the waves, Russia would face not just a loss but a strategic catastrophe, shattering the remnants of its coastal security. Once tethered to the strategic port of Tartus in Syria, where Russia's influence flourished under the shelter of the Assad regime, now lies a barren wasteland. If they still controlled this hub, aid could swiftly arrive. Without it, the Novorossiysk's fate rests precariously in the balance, isolated in hostile waters. As the Mediterranean roils with uncertainty, the question becomes hauntingly clear: what will the future hold for a beleaguered navy struggling to repair its past or reclaim its power? The saga of the Novorossiysk serves as a chilling reminder that beneath the waves, glory and ruin often share the same depths. And in this high-stakes game, time is a ruthless adversary. Will they emerge from this turmoil with their dignity intact or drown in their failures? In a shocking turn of events, Russia's dominance beneath the waves faces unprecedented scrutiny. With approximately 65 submarines in its fleet, Russia has long wielded undersea power as a tool of intimidation. However, a recent incident involving the Kilo-class submarine, Novorossiysk, has exposed vulnerabilities that challenge this perception of might. Deployed in the Mediterranean on a supposed combat mission, the Novorossiysk has succumbed to a catastrophic malfunction. Reports confirm a significant fuel leak, placing its crew of 52 in grave danger. The question lingers: what does this breakdown say about Russia's naval capabilities? Imagine the crew aboard Novorossiysk as they hear the unsettling sounds of alarms echoing through the narrow corridors. The once proud submarine, designed for stealth and supremacy, has become a floating liability. With experts nowhere in sight and essential repair parts missing, the situation grows increasingly dire. This technical failure resonates like a grim warning, a secret that Russia's leadership never wanted to emerge. The absence of a rescue route deepens the crisis. No longer can Russian ships swiftly traverse from a Syrian port to aid the stricken sub. Rescue operations are now hindered by the need to circumnavigate Europe, emphasizing a conspicuous lack of foresight within Russia's naval strategy. Perhaps, this misjudgment is a consequence of sanctions and a reflection of inadequate military training, undermining the authority of a leader eager to project strength. Before the Novorossiysk surfaced, doubts about Russia's naval prowess had already surfaced. The national interest characterized Russia's navy as a paper tiger, revealing its inadequacies long before the ongoing complications in Ukraine. The Kilo-class submarines, including the Novorossiysk, are relics of the early 90s, struggling to adapt to modern warfare. As the Mediterranean waters churn around the sub, one can only imagine the despair and dread permeating the vessel. With the threat of explosions looming over them, the crew must grapple not only with their immediate peril but also the realization that they are part of a greater narrative of decline. In these trying times, the question remains: how will Russia recover from the embarrassment of this incident? With its naval reputation hanging by a thread, the grave implications for future power dynamics are evident. Should the Novorossiysk ultimately succumb to its fate, it may very well signify a pivotal blow to Russia's aquatic influence. The looming silence of its veiled dominance resonates ominously as we await what unfolds next in this gripping saga. A tense situation unfolds on the Mediterranean Sea, where a Russian submarine, the Novorossiysk, may face a devastating fate. What does it mean for a superpower when its undersea muscle is crippled in enemy waters? Without a functioning navy, will Russia's power projection against NATO fade into insignificance? With approximately 65 submarines, Russia has long cast a shadow over rival nations. These vessels serve as instruments of intimidation, lurking beneath the waves, poised to unleash missile strikes at any moment. But now, disarray strikes as one submarine lies vulnerable, incapacitated, drifting through NATO's territory. This breakdown lays bare Russia's naval deficiencies, sparking a complex web of implications. On September 28, reports surfaced detailing the Novorossiysk's plight in the Mediterranean. A considerable technical failure, a catastrophic fuel leak, makes it a sitting duck. Repair efforts are hindered by a lack of parts and technical expertise. The vessel, with 52 men on board, could meet a tragic end if it's not salvaged in time. Picture the scene, an eerie silence enveloping the stricken submarine as crew members face the looming threat of an explosion. The vessel's condition is dire. Leaked diesel fuel creates poisonous fumes, filling sealed compartments and jeopardizing lives. Can anyone inside hold their breath against the overpowering stench? The crew, trapped in this underwater coffin, faces a grave choice: attempt to jettison the hazardous fuel into the sea, risking ignition and further doom. This high-stakes drama unfolds against a backdrop of geopolitical tensions. The Mediterranean Sea, historically a battleground, falls under watchful eyes. The Novorossiysk once embodied Russia's formidable presence in the region, but now its failure represents a stunning setback. Just months ago, it was a symbol of strength, maneuvering through the English Channel as a signal to NATO countries. The stakes are high. Historical echoes resonate as parallels are drawn to the Kursk disaster, a tragedy where 118 souls were lost due to incompetence and pride. Will history repeat itself? As Putin hesitates to accept outside assistance, the fate of the Novorossiysk hangs precariously in the balance. Can Russian pride afford the cost of seeking aid from adversaries, or are its sailors resigned to thumbing their noses at fate? What will happen next? The looming question captures the attention of military analysts worldwide. Reports suggest Russia may attempt to send vessels through the Strait of Gibraltar. But with friendly waters dwindling, can they navigate dangerously hostile territory to attempt a recovery? Or will the Novorossiysk quietly succumb to the depths, epitomizing the fragility of Russian naval power? As this story unfolds, the uncertainty leaves us gripping the edge of our seats. Summary of previous part: the situation for Russia is precarious, especially concerning the challenges surrounding the malfunctioning submarine, Novorossiysk. With a history of avoiding external aid, Vladimir Putin might let his crew suffer again, reminiscent of the Kursk disaster. As Vladimir Putin's offensive against Pokrovsk falters, his forces are ensnared in a devastating conflict. The hope of capturing Pokrovsk by the end of August has swiftly evaporated. Rather than advancing, Russian troops are trapped in a deadly quagmire, losing ground and lives with every fleeting attempt to seize territory. The cost is staggering: 20 Russian soldiers are perishing for every single meter gained, a grim reality laid bare by Euromaidan Press as of September 27. To illustrate, a meter is just under 3.3 feet, a length that reflects the sacrifice of brave souls landing them in a fight against overwhelming odds. Imagine a soldier lying down in the mud, attempting to move forward, only to be targeted by relentless drone strikes above. In a shocking turn, surviving troops have turned to social media, warning young recruits to steer clear of military advertising promising glory and honor. "This is not our war," they proclaim, urging their peers to recognize the grim truth. If you join the Russian military, it's a one-way ticket to the grave. What drives this horrific casualty rate? It's simple tragic ambition. Putin is commanding his soldiers to charge ahead into battle, fully aware they are charging headlong into death itself. The desperate situation in Myrnograd starkly exemplifies this truth. As young lives are tossed aside like mere chess pieces in a losing game. But how much longer can this brutal strategy persist? With the hornet's nest stirred and danger both near and far, this unfolding tragedy signals that Russia, rather than conquering, may find itself trapped in its own failures. The deepening crisis begs the question: will Putin sacrifice even more to avoid the echoes of yet another devastating defeat? Time is running out, and as the drumbeats of conflict echo, the stakes have never been higher. For weeks, Russian forces have been clawing their way toward Myrnograd, a city that holds strategic significance in their campaign against Pokrovsk. The city isn't just any target, it symbolizes Ukraine's resilience and is a pivotal logistical hub in the Donetsk region. Vladimir Putin is fixated on capturing Pokrovsk, believing that once he controls the city, he can then set his sights on Donetsk and potentially the entire Donbass region. But the Russian military's grand strategy has crumbled. They anticipated that Ukrainian defenses would be overwhelmed while focusing on Dobrpilya, paving the way for a swift assault on Myrnograd. Instead, their hopes have been dashed as every advance has been met with fierce Ukrainian resistance. Reports indicate staggering losses, around 20 soldiers per meter of advance, exposing the devastating effectiveness of Ukraine's artillery. Many Russian troops never even reach the front lines, succumbing to relentless fire long before they can engage. The landscape is littered with the charred remains of their armored vehicles, emblematic of Russia's failing campaign. The situation escalates further when the Russian military resorts to using infantry. Troops on foot find themselves tragically outmatched against Ukraine's drone warfare. Myrnihrad, with its towering high-rises, has become a launching pad for Ukrainian drones, allowing for an overwhelming aerial assault. This tactical advantage enables Ukraine to form dense drone walls, rendering any ground-based offensive by Russian infantry practically futile. Each attempt by the Russians only compounds their losses. As drones swoop down, executing precise strikes from vantage points across the city. Imagine the chaos as soldiers, once hopeful, now march into a lethal trap. The air filled with the deafening roar of drone engines and the overwhelming dread of imminent danger. It's a grim tableau, where a single misstep could spell disaster. As they press on, desperation sets in. Will the soldiers find a way through this deadly barrier, or are they merely marching towards their demise under Putin's ill-fated orders? This relentless cycle of ambition and tragedy leaves one to wonder, when will the Kremlin acknowledge the grim reality of its military ambitions, or will they continue to gamble with lives in a war where the stakes couldn't be higher? The fate of these soldiers hangs in the balance, caught in a ruthless game they can't afford to lose. In a city characterized by its towering high-rises, Myrnihrad often finds itself under the shadow of Russian glide bomb attacks. Yet, amidst this chaos, Ukraine has an ace up its sleeve, an extensive network of structures allowing for drone operations. This crucial advantage enables Ukraine to deploy what are known as drone walls, creating formidable barriers against enemy forces. Reports indicate that these aerial defenses have dramatically altered the battlefield dynamics. Picture this: Russian soldiers, once secure in their armored vehicles, now find themselves exposed and on foot, their armor reduced to scrap. They are tasked with an almost impossible mission, to advance through a relentless wall of drones, undetected. But the drones are vigilant. They swoop down methodically, ensuring that any Russian troops trying to escape the onslaught face grim consequences. This has been a nightmare scenario for Russia, especially since Ukraine has shifted its focus to ramping up domestic drone production. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has proudly proclaimed his country's ambition to manufacture up to 8 million drones annually by 2026, following a substantial $7 billion investment from Europe's defense sector. Even without this financial support, Ukraine has already carved out a significant production capacity, continuously deploying drones to weave a protective net against advancing Russian forces. Experts have highlighted the tactical ingenuity behind this strategy. The Atlantic Council underscores how Ukraine's evolving use of unmanned aerial vehicles to construct a drone wall serves as an innovative defense mechanism. If this method proves its worth in the forthcoming months and successfully thwarts Putin's objectives, it could redefine military training and strategies across Europe and beyond. Indeed, Ukraine's drone walls have shown remarkable effectiveness in recent times. Russia's summer offensive has faltered alarmingly, failing to achieve any of its intended goals. Now, Russian troops, stripped of armor and support, find themselves facing off against an unrelenting swarm of drones. With limited resources and overwhelming odds, these soldiers are left with nothing but orders to press forward. The calculus is deadly. For every meter gained, an atrocious toll is taken. 20 Russian soldiers may either perish or sustain injuries. But drones aren't Ukraine's only weapon in this high-stakes game. The resilience and creativity of the Ukrainian forces suggest that they have even more surprises in store as they fortify their defenses. As tension escalates and new strategies emerge, can Russia adapt to this evolving battlefield? Or will they continue to falter against Ukraine's relentless innovations? The outcome hangs in the balance, with both sides preparing for what lies ahead. Just moments ago, we saw how relentless waves of Ukraine's drones swarm Russian forces near Myrnihrad. The kill count is staggering: 20 Russian soldiers fall or get wounded for every single meter they advance. But drones are just the start. Now, imagine this: massive air raids launched by MiG-29 fighter jets, dropping precision JDAM-guided bombs that obliterate entire concentrations of Russian troops before they even get close to the front lines. How does this reshaping the battlefield? And what does it mean for Russia's crumbling advance? In the previous part, we uncovered the exhausting attrition Russia faces against the buzzing drone storm near Myrnihrad. The losses were brutal and relentless, leaving Russian troops stretched thin and exposed. Today, the story zooms in on a new, devastating weapon that Ukraine has deployed with lethal efficiency, fierce airstrikes orchestrated with pinpoint precision. The sky is no longer a safe haven for Russian soldiers. Ukraine's MiG-29 jets, armed with JDAM bombs, have been raining destruction on Russian positions. One particularly chilling incident involved a Russian mine building filled with troops gearing up for an assault. In just moments, the bombs reduced them to nothing but echoes of what once was. The silence after the blast was deafening, broken only by distant crackling and the smell of scorched earth. No chance for mercy, no chance for retreat. But wait, the story darkens. In another strike, a bomb didn't explode. You might think this was a stroke of luck for Russia, but it wasn't. Ukraine unleashed its drones, the silent hunters once again, to finish what the bomb failed to do. A Russian stronghold, thought secure, crumbled under the aerial assault. The fusion of air power and drone warfare is a deadly dance, choreographed to perfection by Ukrainian forces. Every strike chips away at Russian armor. Every explosion steals away soldiers and commanders alike. Russia's response? Forcing its battered infantry to trudge forward on foot, exposed and vulnerable. The eerie groan of trudging boots replaces the roar of armored vehicles now scarce on the battlefield. But this slow crawl comes at a devastating cost, a staggering 20 casualties per meter gained. And the trap tightens. The few Russians that manage to crawl closer to the front find themselves in dire straits, trapped, hunted, and doomed. Overhead, drones buzz incessantly like metallic hornets, flushing soldiers out of underground shelters into the unforgiving light of snipers and artillery. Images captured show Ukrainian Marines directed in real time by drone operators guiding them to Russian hiding spots deep beneath the surface. It's an eerie, relentless hunt, with no place on or under the ground safe for Russian troops. Ukraine's mastery of combining drones, precise airstrikes, and ground maneuvers makes this grim symphony of destruction possible. It's the brutal reality of modern warfare, one that leaves no room for errors or mercy. The synergy is ruthless and perfect, and Russia's soldiers bear the devastating consequences. Now, what happens when this devastating pattern meets Russia's dwindling resources and crumbling tactics? Can the battered forces pull back from the brink? Or does this signify a deeper unraveling that might change the war's entire course? The next chapter may hold answers that shock and unsettle even the most jaded observers. Previously, we saw how Ukrainian forces brilliantly combined air and ground tactics to corner Russian infiltrators hiding underground near Pokrovsk. This art of warfare showcased Ukraine's tactical mastery. Now, let's dive deeper into what's unfolding in Dobripilya, a key hotspot where Ukraine is once again turning Russia's offensive plans into devastating traps. Russia aimed to divert attention in Dobripilya, hoping to relieve pressure from Myrnihrad. But instead, this move backfired spectacularly. Ukraine has skillfully enclosed Russian soldiers within deadly cauldrons, leaving them with nowhere to escape. The losses are staggering. You can almost hear the tension in the air, the uneasy silence broken only by distant artillery fire and the crackle of radios as soldiers realize their predicament. How did Russia end up so trapped despite such force? Back in Myrnihrad, Russia's goal was clear: seize the city to establish a base for a fresh assault on Pokrovsk. Seizing high-rise buildings there would allow Russian drone operators to dominate the skies. But Russia has not taken Myrnihrad. Why not? Because every meter they inch forward costs them roughly 20 soldiers and casualties. That's an unthinkable toll, a relentless grind that exhausts any hope of victory. The air seems thick with despair for the advancing troops, the ground soaked in sacrifice. Euromaidan press warns this pace is unsustainable. Ukraine is systematically draining Russian forces. Pokrovsk, the jewel Putin obsessively targeted in the Donetsk region, stands firm, a symbol of defiance amid chaos. Over 100,000 Russian troops were thrown into this region during summer. Yet, that overwhelming force failed miserably to break the city's defenses. Viktor Trihobov, the Ukrainian spokesperson from the Dnipro Operational and Strategic Group, casts this failure into chilling focus. Russia began with about 190,000 troops for the full invasion. Now, 100,000 remain funneled into the doomed Pokrovsk offensive alone. Meanwhile, Pokrovsk itself, a city once home to 60,000 people, endures the siege, its fate hanging by a thread as summer's war campaign draws to a close. What happens next? Can Ukraine crush this massive Russian force completely, or will the next moves tilt the scales in a way no one expects? The sun sets over a battlefield steeped in desperation, and the question lingers, who will survive the coming storm? In the shadowy depths of the Mediterranean, a perilous scene unfolded. Clanking metal, the echo of frayed machinery, and the hushed whispers of the crew created an atmosphere thick with dread aboard the Russian submarine, Novorossiysk. Once a symbol of naval prowess, this imposing vessel found itself paralyzed, trapped in a disastrous malfunction. But what cataclysmic twist led to such an embarrassing unraveling for one of the world's most formidable militaries? A commanding presence beneath the waves, Russia boasts around 65 submarines, wielding them as instruments of fear and intimidation. Enemy forces tremble at the thought of nuclear missiles lurking nearby. The Novorossiysk, part of Russia's elite Black Sea Fleet, was expected to embody this strength. Yet, on September 28, everything changed. The submarine, tasked with unknown but crucial combat duties, experienced a catastrophic failure in the Strait of Gibraltar, within NATO's watchful gaze. What unfolded next was even more shocking. Reports surfaced of a massive fuel leak, hinting at a potential explosion that could claim the lives of its 52 crew members. Stranded and powerless, the crew wrestled with their fate. As the submarine surfaced, they faced haunting uncertainty. Would they be able to repair the vessel before disaster struck? With no qualified specialists aboard and crucial parts missing, time was running out. As the frantic crew attempted to contain the disaster, the air around them became laden with the noxious scent of diesel fuel. Even in the highest pressure conditions, the crew would risk exposure to fumes that could lead to dizziness, headaches, or worse. The tension was palpable. Would the sickening aroma lead to a fiery igniting? Every second felt like an eternity as they grappled with the choices that lay ahead. Panic set in as the crew realized that a desperate decision loomed, to pump the hazardous fuel directly into the sea. But at what cost? Not only would this disastrous move waste precious resources, but it also risked igniting an inferno that could obliterate everything on board. In a heartbeat, the situation transformed from a mere technical failure to a race against time with naval disaster hanging overhead. Just when it seemed matters couldn't spiral further, haunting memories resurfaced. The Novorossiysk's plight echoed the tragic Kursk disaster of 2000, a moment that defined an era of Russian naval misfortune. With history repeating itself, the looming threat of a similar catastrophe added weight to the gravity of the current situation. Would pride prevent them from accepting foreign assistance in a time of desperation? Meanwhile, on land, the Russian military struggled as well. With over 190,000 troops pledged for the invasion of Ukraine, the reality was grim. Despite deploying half this force to capture Pokrovsk, a city now staunchly resisting, losses soared dramatically. For every square kilometer gained, 124 soldiers lost their lives. A staggering sum that painted a bleak picture of combat inefficiency. How long could this disastrous fate continue? As the Novorossiysk drifted closer to an uncertain fate, questions echoed among the elite ranks of Russian leadership. Will they ever emerge from this quagmire unscathed? Meanwhile, the crew faced impending doom, caught between a malfunctioning vessel and the unforgiving waters of the Mediterranean. The weight of this crisis was exacerbated by a single short phrase that described their reality: the clock is ticking. In the previous segment, we explored how Dmitry Rogozin, once a central figure in Russia's space and defense sectors, openly acknowledged Ukraine's tactical edge in the ongoing conflict. Despite Russia's claims of fighting solo against high-tech nations, Rogozin confessed that Moscow's advances are slow and costly. Now, let's dive deeper into what's truly crippling Russia on the battlefield. What if Russia's soldiers were fighting a battle they simply couldn't win, not because of numbers, but because of invisible enemies buzzing overhead? Imagine struggling to push forward while the very ground you seek to hold is under constant watch from thousands of unseen mechanical eyes. According to Rogozin, that's exactly the nightmare Russia faces now. In Ukraine's front lines, especially around Zaporizhzhia, Russian equipment is being destroyed before it even arrives, leaving small assault groups to claw forward with barely any success. Flashback to the hum of drone propellers slicing through the summer air in Myrnarad, where Ukraine's forces deploy swarms of drones by the hundreds daily. The warm metallic scent of freshly printed circuits, mingled with tension, saturates the air as these electronic warriors silently gather intelligence. It's not just a battle of metal and bullets anymore, it's a battle of dominion over the skies. Rogozin paints a chilling picture. Ukraine's drone dominance is nothing short of staggering. 10 times more than we do, he admits when questioned about their quantity. While Russia sputters to produce its own drones, Ukraine churns out anywhere from 100 to 250 long-range drones every single day, with numbers only increasing. The scale is dizzying. Production in Ukraine outpaces Russia's by millions annually, with Ukraine's potential drone arsenal hitting an estimated 8 million. Russia's feeble attempts to catch up resulted in producing 2.4 million drones last year, a figure dwarfed by Ukraine's might. On the battlefield, this swarm effect changes everything. Drones take the roles soldiers once held, reducing Russian advances to costly inches where 20 soldiers fall for every meter gained. The military math is grim. Manpower can't outmatch technology when thousands of mechanical eyes deliver precise strikes and snipe from above. This stark reality forces Russia to confront a future shadowed by drone warfare, where numbers alone no longer dictate victory. Can Moscow find a way out of this deadly dance? Or is Russia trapped in a slow bleed, caught between dwindling resources and a relentless enemy that has already rewritten the rulebook of modern warfare? The fight continues, and the skies above Ukraine are buzzing louder than ever. What will Russia's next move be? Stay tuned. In the shadowy depths of the Mediterranean, a colossal threat to maritime security is spiraling into calamity. Russia, boasting an impressive fleet of about 65 submarines, always seemed invincible beneath the waves. But what happens when that might reveals itself as a facade? The lurking specter of vulnerability emerged just off the coasts of NATO territories as one of Russia's Kilo-class submarines, the Novorossiysk, succumbed to a catastrophic failure, plunging Vladimir Putin into yet another spiral of humiliation. Is this a new chapter of decline for the once mighty Russian Navy? Imagine the piercing silence surrounding the Novorossiysk as it floats aimlessly, its fate sealed by a grievous technical malfunction. Reports from the Economic Times have confirmed this vessel, a crucial player in Russia's Black Sea Fleet, is marooned in the Mediterranean, a ghost ship on a dangerous threshold. With an undefined mission now irrelevant, the reality sinks in. It's become a lame duck, grappling with a severe fuel leak that threatens an explosive judgment. Can disaster be averted, or is the submarine's fate already sealed? A sense of dread hangs heavy in the air as details seep from the Russian telegram channel, VCHKOGPU. Fuel leaking directly into the hold. No spare parts, no skilled hands to fix the critical issues, the reports reveal. The suffocating scent of diesel fuel permeates the air in the cramped space, deadly fumes clinging to the crew, endangering their lives long before any potential ignition. Will the crew manage to contain this volatile situation? Or will they succumb to the noxious gas swirling around them? As the world watches, crucial decisions hang in the balance. The crew faces a stark choice: pump the hazardous fuel directly into the sea, risking exposure and environmental disaster. Yet, allowing it to remain could lead to an inferno. The reality is precarious. Will their actions save them, or see them plunge into chaos? The Mediterranean, once a theater of power projection, now threatens to become a graveyard for Russian pride. Historically, the ghosts of past tragedies loom large. The Kursk catastrophe of 2000, the loss of 118 sailors, informs this present crisis. Putin's reluctance to accept assistance was evident then, and it appears history is set to repeat itself. In a world increasingly hostile, will the Russian leader risk further embarrassment refusing NATO aid? What if this spirals into an unprecedented disaster, a stark reminder of the Navy's crumbling facade? The clock is ticking. With allegations of struggling naval efficacy amplified by another incident involving a Project 21631 Bayan-M missile corvette that recently collided with a civilian vessel, the indicators are dire. Russia's claims of maintaining its combat readiness after such blunders feel hollow amidst this chaos. As the Novorossiysk faces disenchantment and failure, the time for action draws near. Can Russia salvage this calamity before it fully ignites into a reflection of its fading naval might? As shadows deepen across the Mediterranean, the endgame looms ever closer. The Novorossiysk's only advantage, its ability to ghost and strike, lies precariously at the edge of annihilation. Will the crew emerge victorious, or is this destined to be a grim illustration of the depths of Russia's nautical ambition? Only time will tell. And with each passing moment, uncertainty grows, echoing through the turbulent ocean waters. Previously, we saw how Ukraine's relentless drone surge has stalled Russia's advance. Russian forces, still relying on old-school infantry assaults and armor, push forward slowly, paying a heavy price with every step. Their traditional tactics falter against modern drone warfare, leaving the front line almost frozen in place. But could this stalemate actually be working in Ukraine's favor? Dmitry Rogozin paints a grim picture. The front moves with agonizing slowness, soldiers advancing in small assault groups of 3, trench warfare, equipment burning before it even reaches the line. Russia pours troops into battles that yield tiny gains or none at all. You'd expect sheer numbers to force breakthroughs in an attritional fight, but instead, Russia's forces bleed while barely inching forward. What's striking is how Ukraine has transformed its approach since that failed 2023 counteroffensive. They've embraced drones and technology to break the mold, turning the odds against Russia's massed forces. United 24 media notes that while Russia uses drones mainly for distant missile strikes, on the ground they still lean heavily on tanks and troop waves, resources rapidly thinning. The battlefront, especially around places like Pokrovsk, holds largely steady. Some Russian acquisitions even slip back. Here, the staggering figure emerges, 20 soldiers lost per meter gained. Such brutal math doesn't spell progression, it signals a deadlock. Yet, oddly enough, this standstill might be exactly what Ukraine needs right now. Could the battlefield's frozen state be their hidden weapon? As the guns roar and drones buzz overhead, the question lingers, can Russia break loose from this costly rut? Or will the slow grind sap their strength until their assault collapses under its own weight? The next twist might come not from firepower, but from unexpected strategy shifts. Will Moscow adapt, or sink deeper into a tragic quagmire? The battlefield lines haven't really shifted much. The fighting has dragged into a deadlock where every meter forward costs 20 lives. This grueling standstill seems to favor Ukraine, at least for now. But what if this stalemate actually hides dangers for both sides? One man who worries about this is Valery Zaluzny, Ukraine's former top commander and now ambassador to the United Kingdom. While some, like Russian figure Dmitry Rogozin, see the frozen front as slowly draining Russia through heavy casualties, Zaluzny warns it could backfire on Ukraine too. He paints a haunting parallel to World War I, where long-lasting defensive lines eventually collapsed, because defenders failed to keep pressuring forward. Imagine the trench warfare of that era, barbed wire, endless artillery barrages, the scent of gunpowder thick in the air, soldiers crouched in mud and fear. Zaluzny sees shades of that in today's fighting. Defenders once held the advantage with mines and fortifications, leading to brutal stalemates. Yet attackers found ways to break through, often with a surge of armored vehicles, which were the tanks then, now replaced by drone swarms far more deadly on the modern battlefield. Zaluzny warns that a prolonged deadlock risks grinding down forces and resources on both sides. He says static warfare benefits the enemy, giving them time to regroup and reinforce. The danger? Russia could use this pause to rebuild its military power, even while suffering heavy losses. On Ukraine's side, maintaining the line drains their men, machines, and morale under crushing pressure. What if neither can break the other? Who will crack first under this unrelenting strain? As the war grinds on with terrible cost, the writing seems clear: this stalemate might not be a victory, but a fragile, deadly suspension. The war's fate hinges on endurance, strategy, and which side finally gives way, just as Vladimir Putin planned. Can Ukraine hold the line, or will the deadlock spell disaster? The outcome remains uncertain, and the battlefield holds its breath. In the murky depths of the Mediterranean, a Russian submarine lurks, a titan of the seas, or so it was thought. But this titan, the Novorossiysk, has encountered a catastrophic breakdown that threatens not just the vessel, but the very pride of Russia itself. With its crew of 52 caught in a dire situation, tension mounts. The air is thick with urgency, and the faint scent of diesel lingers ominously. Will Russia's undersea Leviathan rise to the occasion, or is it doomed to become a haunting memory? Just days ago, this submarine sailed with a robust reputation, part of Russia's extensive naval strength. Yet, now it floats uselessly, a victim of severe technical failure, reported on September 28 by the Economic Times. A fuel leak has turned the once formidable Novorossiysk into a floating time bomb, ticking against the crew's survival. As the vessel's systems falter, what lurks beneath the surface? A potential explosion that could claim lives and engulf the submarine in flames. Unable to repair the vessel, and lacking specialists or necessary equipment, the crew faces an unthinkable choice. Reports from the Russian telegram channel VCHKOGPU reveal alarming details. Fuel is seeping directly into the hold, transforming the submarine into a powder keg ready to ignite. Dreading the possible disaster, one wonders, how did it come to this? The richest history of naval pride now teeters on the brink of tragedy. As memories stir past disasters, both crew and nation feel the weight of history. Few can forget the Kursk disaster, where lost lives were met with a silence that echoed throughout Russia. The ghosts of those past days hover over the Novorossiysk. What if the country's pride fails again? While Putin may dream of a fierce naval presence, reality strikes a baleful reminder that beneath the waves lies vulnerability. In an absurd twist, the only option left might involve pumping the leaking fuel into the sea, sacrificing precious resources in a desperate bid for safety. This hazardous solution raises a chilling question: can they contain the chaos before it consumes them? The Mediterranean is far from a nurturing harbor for a submarine in distress. Amidst the horror, environmental disasters wait patiently, ready to strike. Yet what truly haunts the crew is the looming chance of being rescued, or worse, having to reject aid from NATO entities while floating dangerously close to their shores. The pride of a nation weighs heavily, but so does the desire for survival, which will prevail. Every decision they make may decide their fate or veil them in eternal disgrace. With every passing moment, the urgency builds. This broken titan represents both Russia's tenacity and fragility. The world watches and waits, each breath holding the potential for disaster or salvation. What future lies ahead for the Novorossiysk and its beleaguered crew? The answer remains submerged, caught between the echoes of history and the harsh whispers of the present. In the end, will this submarine become a symbol of insignificance, or a wake-up call for a nation at war with itself? The oceans know no mercy, they only echo the clamor of impending doom or the triumph over adversity. The fate of the Novorossiysk teeters on the edge, a tale still unfolding in the silent depths. Previously, we revealed how Russia's intense focus on portraying Ukraine as its overwhelming enemy has blinded its leadership to dangers brewing at home. These blind spots have let internal threats, like rising terrorism, slip through unnoticed. Now, we turn to an expert who sheds light on how this neglect has deepened cracks within Russia's own security system. In a revealing interview on late September 25, a defense analyst explained, when a vast share of resources head straight to the front line, it leaves dangerous gaps in domestic security. She warned that since the invasion of Ukraine, terrorist activity inside Russia has surged sharply. But instead of heeding intelligence warnings or boosting defenses against these homegrown threats, Putin channels scarce security resources elsewhere, specifically, toward silencing his political foes. This is a critical choice that sacrifices public safety in favor of the president's grip on power. The analyst's full report digs deeper, documenting how these gaps aren't just about limited manpower or budget cuts. It's also a severe lack of political will to confront rising terrorist risks head-on. This mindset becomes all too clear when we revisit one of Moscow's darkest days in recent memory, the Crocus City Hall massacre. On March 22, 2024, just days after Putin won his controversial fifth term, but weeks ahead of his formal inauguration, four terrorists unleashed hell at this crowded concert venue. Armed and merciless, they opened fire with deadly precision. The death toll climbed to at least 149 innocent civilians. Over 600 more were wounded, shattered lives forever. The Islamic State quickly claimed responsibility, marking Russia's worst terror strike in years. Crucially, investigators revealed that the main suspects hailed from Tajikistan, a nation long tied to Russia politically and economically, yet struggling with its own turmoil. This connection exposed another uncomfortable truth: Putin's selective attention hasn't only endangered Russians but weakened regional stability. How deep does this web of negligence and repression really go? And could ignoring internal security threats sooner have prevented such carnage? As we continue, the story darkens further, unveiling more costly consequences of Russia's misplaced priorities. What seems like political control may very well be a deadly gamble with the nation's future. In a world on the brink of chaos, one nation's grip on power wavers as its military might reveals more cracks than ever. Russia, boasting a formidable arsenal, particularly its fleet of around 65 submarines, finds itself in a precarious position. These underwater giants are weapons of intimidation. But what happens when their strength falters? This is precisely the question that gnaws at Vladimir Putin as a Russian submarine, namely the Novorossiysk, faces a catastrophic failure in NATO's front yard. Deployed for combat in the Mediterranean, it sits crippled due to a severe technical issue that signals a brewing disaster. The world watches closely as the Navy's much-touted power falters. Just imagine the scene: a hulking vessel, once a symbol of strength, trapped and powerless in the expansive blue. The depths it once ruled have become its prison. The Economic Times first broke the news, detailing how a breakdown left the Kilo-class submarine adrift in the Strait of Gibraltar. With a crew of 52 on board, the stakes couldn't be higher. A catastrophic fuel leak threatens to ignite, turning a once imposing weapon into a floating gamble. What's worse? The crew lacks the expertise, and necessary parts are unaccounted for. Russia is in a frantic race against time to salvage its pride, and its sailors. As whispers from the VCHKOGPU Telegram channel reveal the severity of the situation, the stakes escalate. Fuel is leaking directly into the hold, the channel warns, raising alarms about a potential inferno brewing within the vessel. Can you hear the ominous creaking of metal? The suffocating stench of diesel fuel adds to the tension. Breathing in this toxic air could spell doom for the crew, and sealing off the hold isn't a foolproof solution. What about the risk of an explosion? As they try to pump the dangerous fuel into the sea, the looming horror grows: sparks could cascade into disaster. This scene reeks of desperation and dire consequences. The Mediterranean Sea, normally an expanse of tranquility, now stands as witness to Russia's naval embarrassment. What unfolds next can only be described as a shocking unraveling of power dynamics. Can they escape this self-inflicted disaster before it leads to tragedy? Just as ominous echoes of the past return, the legacy of the Kursk submarine disaster looms large. Back in 2000, a technical misstep led to a grave loss, leaving families shattered and a government scrambling to save face. Now, the specter of history threatens to repeat itself. But remember, Putin's pride is at stake. Will he allow international assistance, or will his stubbornness seal the fate of the Novorossiysk and its crew? The tension builds as history teaches a crucial lesson. One can only hope that the echoes of the past don't claim more lives in the present. As pressure mounts, the question remains, how long until the tension snaps? Will this be another chapter in Russia's tumultuous maritime history, or can they stave off disaster? Time is running out. Previously, we saw Russia accusing Ukraine and the West of being behind terrorist strikes. Ukraine denied these claims sharply. But was that all a smokescreen for a far bigger crisis inside Russia? The truth might be darker. Russia may have known about threats like the Crocus City Hall attack ahead of time. Yet, it lacked the strength to act. With most of its power poured into the restless battlefield of Ukraine, warnings were dismissed as false alarms or distractions. Imagine the atmosphere in Russia's overloaded security forces. The famous Federal Security Service, once formidable, is now stretched beyond capacity, and perhaps fragmented, especially in volatile regions like the North Caucasus. This area has become a hotspot where extremist violence quietly spikes. Religious sites have been assaulted, underscoring a grim revival of unrest. It's as if a silent storm is brewing, growing fiercer while Moscow's gaze is fixed elsewhere. Inside crowded prisons, unrest simmers too. Riots break out, sparked by harsh crackdowns that fail to tackle the root causes of terrorism. The government's iron-fisted approach seems only to fuel more chaos. This shift is noticeable beyond Russia's borders. Western countries have begun issuing stark travel warnings, revealing how unstable parts of the Russian Federation have become. The British government warns of active terrorist groups in the North Caucasus, especially Dagestan. The security operations carried out by Russian forces there are often rushed, reactive gestures rather than calculated strikes. In June 2024, just months after the Crocus attack, a brutal strike targeted churches and synagogues, killing 20 people, a horrifying echo of regional unrest spiraling violently out of control. Experts at the Sofan Center shed light on this creeping disaster. Terrorism in Russia hasn't emerged suddenly, it's been festering. The North Caucasus has long been responsible for the majority of attacks inside Russia, signaling a failure of those entrusted to safeguard the nation. So, was this calculated distraction or a sign of crumbling control? Could Russia continue to juggle a draining war abroad, while terror surges within its borders? The real question looms, is Moscow losing grip over its own territory, unraveling from the inside before the world even notices? The rise of jihadist militants in the North Caucasus didn't happen overnight. It traces back to the aftermath of the First Chechen War, which ended in 1996. Then, a fresh wave surged with the close of the Second Chechen War. For decades, this simmering extremism has been a ticking time bomb. Now, the war in Ukraine has thrown fuel on the fire, making it easier for these groups to strike. Why? Because Russia's security forces simply aren't strong enough to hold them back. This chaos is tied tightly to a brutal military strategy in Ukraine. Putin's approach, described as just cruel, demands endless sacrifices. Soldiers are sent not to win battles but to bleed the enemy dry, acting as cannon fodder in a relentless war of attrition. Each wave serves to erode Ukraine's defenses a little more, but at what cost? The vast human toll is staggering, over 1.1 million Russian soldiers lost by late September 2025. Imagine the impact back home. Russia is losing not just troops but key security personnel, including members of the secret service known as the FSB. These secret agents are usually the backbone of Russia's internal stability. Yet, many have been redeployed to Ukrainian battlefields, leaving gaps in homeland security. In July of this year, for instance, Ukraine eliminated 2 operatives from a Russian secret cell that had assassinated one of Ukraine's own intelligence officers. The message is clear: Moscow is draining vital resources, exposing the country to greater internal threats. Could this strategic gamble backfire and unravel Russia from within? The deeper question remains, how long can a nation bleed before it breaks? Previously, we saw that Russian Secret Service agents, usually tied to domestic matters, were active inside Ukraine, responsible for assassinating a Ukrainian Secret Service colonel. This shows where Putin is pouring Russia's resources, into covert operations beyond the battlefield. Now, Add to this grim picture the soldiers who might one day have become secret agents, but now lie dead on Ukraine's front lines. Russia faces a double crisis, losing seasoned members of its internal security forces, and seeing its pool of potential future recruits shrivel away in the carnage. But the problems don't end with these immediate losses. Across Russia's far-flung regions, rising death tolls are stoking bitter resentment. Since 2023, reports reveal that ethnic minority groups are being drafted and dying at disproportionate rates. Imagine the pain of families losing fathers and sons, grief fueling anger, sparking extremism, and inadvertently breeding the very terrorism Moscow fears. There's an unsettling tension simmering beneath the surface of Russian society, a pressure cooker of discontent growing louder with every loss. What is Putin doing to tackle this ticking domestic time bomb? Earlier, we glimpsed part of the answer. He's channeling his remaining security forces not against real threats, but towards smashing anyone who dares criticize the war in Ukraine. His obsession with this conflict has narrowed his focus so drastically it's blinding him to the cracks appearing at home. On September 22, the Associated Press shared troubling insights from Mariana Katsarova, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in Russia. She warned that repression within Russia is not only intensifying, it's exploding on an unprecedented scale. Instead of confronting the rising domestic threat, Putin is doubling down on silencing dissent about the Ukraine invasion. His fixation over the war risks tearing his own country apart. Could this tunnel vision lead to an even darker unraveling inside Russia? Is Putin sacrificing his nation's stability to cling to a faltering war effort? The mounting human cost is demanding an answer, before the consequences become irreversible. In the shadowy depths of Russia's political storm, a chilling story unfolds. The Kremlin's crackdown is surging like a tidal wave, swallowing voices that dare to challenge its narrative. Imagine a country where speaking out against war paints a target on your back, and where the very young are branded terrorists. How far will this spiral go before it devours the truth itself? Just moments ago, we saw how Russia's brutal grip tightens on those who oppose the official line. But what does this crackdown really mean for the people living under this stifling fear? The answer is harrowing. In recent times, Russia has unleashed an unprecedented wave of arrests. Not just any arrests, these are legal strikes aimed at silencing peaceable dissent. From mid-2024 through July 2025, nearly 4,000 individuals found themselves convicted. They did nothing more than quietly disagree. Among them, shockingly, lie children barely old enough to understand their world, aged only 14 to 17, branded as terrorists or extremists. Who decides these labels? And what kind of world is this turning into? But the assault isn't limited to people alone. More than 1,000 organizations, including many journalists, have been slapped with the ominous foreign agent label. This label is not just a bureaucratic term, it's a weapon designed to isolate, intimidate, and render them voiceless. Picture journalists, the very lifeblood of truth, trapped in a labyrinth of suspicion, unable to report freely. The Kremlin isn't just shadowboxing dissent, it's choking off the flow of information itself. President Putin's strategy here is stark. By silencing dissenters and manipulating the narrative, he hopes to create a facade that Russia is invincible in its war efforts. The truth? It's been buried beneath layers of propaganda and fear. This repression does more than protect the regime, it targets anyone who could possibly rally the people to change the tide. The looming threat of domestic unrest, one that could topple Putin's iron grip, is being smothered before it can even breathe. But beneath this surface, the question lingers, can truth survive this kind of darkness? Or will the voices crushed today become the spark of a storm tomorrow? The tension in Russia's streets is palpable, the whispers grow louder, even as the authorities try desperately to muffle them. What will happen when the pressure finally breaks? Will those labeled enemies today rise and overturn a system built on fear? The answers hide in the silence left behind by those who vanished, and the futures they tried desperately to protect. In the summer of 2023, significant changes swept through Russia's legislative landscape. The State Duma implemented new amendments defining foreign agents. Now, any individual or organization suspected of receiving foreign funding could be classified as a foreign agent. Imagine the implications of this. In a nation where the government exercises tight control over information, those wishing to present alternative perspectives must venture outside state funding, often looking toward foreign investment. However, that funding comes with a label, one that marks them as outlaws in their own land. This amendment doesn't just target organizations but extends its reach into the lives of ordinary citizens. Now, anyone considered to show support or even engage with a foreign agent might face penalties. Can you picture the fear that looms over an average Russian? If someone reads an article or watches a video produced by a foreign-funded entity, they could be fined up to $600 for merely rectifying a violation. This isn't merely about legalities, it's about erasing dissent. Each punitive action underscores a broader strategy of suppression aimed at silencing voices that contradict President Putin's narrative. Even by simply consuming foreign content, citizens find themselves caught in a web of potential consequences, diverting attention from uncomfortable truths, especially regarding domestic turmoil linked to ongoing conflicts like the invasion of Ukraine. Take the case of the rapper Legalize, who faced hefty fines for promoting a music video made in collaboration with an animator also tagged as a foreign agent. This illustrates how quickly the grip tightens around freedom of expression. Any interaction with this foreign agent system can lead to dire repercussions. As Russia tightens its chokehold on information, the question arises, what future lies ahead for those who dare to challenge the status quo? How long before the voices silenced become echoes of a past once filled with diverse thoughts and ideas? The chilling atmosphere of repression looms ominously, transforming innovation into an act of defiance. As we delve into more intricate stories, consider, how long can a regime sustain itself when it fears the very voices of its people? What would happen if those voices united rather than cowered? The future remains uncertain, yet one thing is clear, the struggle for truth has only just begun. Russia stands as one of the most formidable underwater powers, boasting an impressive fleet of around 65 submarines. The Kremlin wields this power as a tool of intimidation, ensuring that rival nations are constantly aware of the lurking threats beneath the waves. But what happens when this show of strength is overshadowed by mishaps? Recently, a Russian Kilo-class submarine, the Novorossiysk, faced an embarrassing setback in the Mediterranean Sea. Deployed on a combat mission, this vital asset broke down, resulting in significant humiliation for Russia's leadership. On September 28, the Economic Times revealed that the submarine suffered a severe technical failure, leading to a significant fuel leak. This disrepair may have left the vessel in a perilous state, not just threatening its mission but putting the lives of its 52 crew members at risk. A cataclysmic disaster loomed as the stricken submarine surfaced near the Strait of Gibraltar. With no qualified personnel on board to address the issue and a shortage of spare parts, the crew was essentially powerless to prevent catastrophe. Imagine the tension on that submarine as sailors anticipated the worst. As news of the situation spread, reports from the Russian telegram channel VCHKOGPU indicated just how dire the circumstances were. Fuel streaming into the hold posed explosive risks every moment, while the crew struggled against fumes that could induce dizziness and serious health problems. Every breath in that narrow chamber became a gamble with fate. They were trapped, grappling with the possibility that their next breath could be their last. Desperate measures were needed. The crew faced a grim decision: pump the leaking fuel directly into the Mediterranean, carrying potential environmental repercussions. This act of desperation not only placed their mission at further risk but could also ignite chaos if conditions spiraled out of control. This unfolding situation echoed memories of the Kursk tragedy back in 2000, where negligence and poor decision-making led to the loss of numerous lives. Back then, Vladimir Putin resisted international assistance, prioritizing the preservation of state secrecy over human life. The shadow of past failures loomed heavily over the Novorossiysk. Would history repeat itself under such dire circumstances? Not long ago, the Novorossiysk had symbolized Russian naval prowess, capable of executing strategic threats with its deployed armaments. It had even been on maneuvers in the English Channel, projecting power to NATO countries. Now, it perched precariously on the brink of disaster, transformed from a menacing force into an object of ridicule. Undeniably, Putin now faced a potential debacle, a humiliation he couldn't afford, especially with ongoing tensions with the West. The Novorossiysk's existence reflected Russia's present challenges. The submarine, built with modern specifications in 2010, was expected to represent the might of the Russian Navy. Instead, it now appeared a shadow of its potential, caught in a tangle of incompetence, mechanical failure, and the looming threat of exposure. Would Putin abandon his naval crew to save face, or would he leverage this calamity for his political agenda? The clock was ticking, and each moment brought the crew closer to a fate they desperately sought to avoid. In the previous part, we saw how Russia's crackdown targets not extremists, but mainly thinkers, journalists, and voices critical of the Kremlin's narrative. When harsh fines and imprisonment fail to silence them, the regime turns to a darker tool. Imagine the chilling sound of electric shocks ripping through flesh, the cold metal probes pressing into skin, cutting through hope. Torture in Russia is not a rare, isolated horror, it is widespread and systematic, used to crush dissent far beyond typical punishment. Not just Russian citizens suffer, but also Ukrainian prisoners and innocent civilians caught in the crossfire. One harrowing story reveals a Ukrainian man subjected to nearly lethal electric shocks. Rushed to emergency surgery, he barely survived, and when he woke, he found chilling words burned into his stomach: victory. Glory to Russia. This brutal practice is not just about inflicting pain. It's a calculated effort to terrorize anyone daring to question the Kremlin's version of reality. And to make matters worse, Russia is now actively pushing to escape international oversight. It's preparing to withdraw from the European Committee for the Prevention of Torture. Without outside eyes, it will be nearly impossible to expose these atrocities. This is suppression on two levels, silencing the victims inside and blocking the world from seeing the truth. Can such a tightly controlled grip on the truth last in a country simmering with unrest? Russia is erecting legal barriers to silence opposition and mask its darkest deeds. Yet the deeper it buries dissent, the more it fails to address the root causes of chaos spawned by its own aggressive war. The real question emerges: when control fails and the facade cracks, what will rise from the shadows? The Kremlin's grip on Russia's narrative grows tighter, yet beneath the surface, turmoil festers. The war in Ukraine consumes vast resources, leaving the country's internal problems neglected and worsening. This brewing domestic crisis threatens to push Russia toward an irreversible collapse. Meanwhile, the United States is intensifying its campaign far from home. After assembling a formidable naval force in the South Caribbean, the U.S. has sharpened its focus on Venezuela's troubled government and the criminal cartels that operate within its borders. Several drug smuggling boats have already been eliminated, signaling that even more aggressive actions lie ahead. Within weeks, deep strikes on Venezuelan soil could shatter the fragile criminal networks, marking a drastic escalation in America's war against narcotics trafficking. This story reaches back to late August when then-President Donald Trump deployed a powerful naval flotilla to the South Caribbean Sea, looming off Venezuela's coast. 8 warships surged through the waters, accompanied by MEF-35 fighter jets and a formidable force of 4,500 to 5,000 servicemen and women. The scale of this deployment was unprecedented in decades, sending a stark message to drug cartels operating in the region. Days after arriving, U.S. forces targeted and destroyed vessels suspected of ferrying narcotics, with evidence linking them to Venezuela's notorious Tren de Aragua cartel. These initial strikes set the stage for what promises to be a relentless offensive. But how far will this campaign go? Will these strikes cripple the cartels? Or provoke an even fiercer response? The coming weeks could redefine the battle for control in this volatile region, leaving the world waiting, breathless, for what happens next. The previous chapter revealed a daring display of power. The United States positioned one of its most formidable fleets in the Caribbean, sending a clear warning. Days later, its forces struck hard, sinking vessels tied to the notorious Tren de Aragua cartel, which used the sea as a smuggling highway. But that was only the opening movement. Now, a storm brews on the horizon. The U.S. has made a stark promise: no sanctuary for drug cartels, no matter where they hide or operate. Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, declared in no uncertain terms that the fight will extend to every shadow and every hideout. But Venezuela's leader, Nicolas Maduro, is not standing idly by. He sees these moves as a ploy to unseat him. In response, Maduro has unleashed a wide mobilization of militias across his nation, an uneasy display of raw strength. The tension crackles in the air as Venezuelan F-16 fighter jets roar past the American warships, filling the Caribbean skies with defiance. Military exercises echo off the waves, a stark message sent from Caracas to Washington. Yet, the U.S. fleet remains unshaken. American forces continue targeting suspected drug runners, pressure mounting like the tension before a storm breaks. Behind closed doors, unnamed officials confirm one chilling truth. Plans are underway for a more aggressive turn, deep strikes inside Venezuelan territory. According to sources speaking off the record, military strategists are drawing up operations that could unleash strikes within weeks. This marks a dangerous escalation, transforming a maritime confrontation into a direct assault on the continent's soil. What will this mean for the fragile balance in the Caribbean? Could these strikes ignite open conflict? The calculated sequence from naval presence to targeted attacks has unfolded like clockwork so far. Now, the next step threatens to shatter any illusions of restraint. Will this decisive move crush the cartel's lifeline, or spiral into chaos far beyond anyone's control? The clock is ticking, and the Caribbean is holding its breath. Imagine a silent ocean, with an unseen predator lurking beneath the waves. Russia possesses around 65 submarines, formidable guardians of its sovereignty. Yet, lurking in the depths can also mean lurking peril. This time, that peril has come to light. On September 28, reports emerged of a Russian submarine, the Novorossiysk, derailed by a catastrophic failure in NATO's backyard. Deployed on critical missions, this diesel-electric submarine has now become a floating liability, dead in the water, and with a serious fuel leak threatening an explosive disaster. Can you hear the ticking clock, as time runs out for its crew of 52? For days, the tales of malfunction have echoed across shores as the sub struggles to remain above water. With a dismal likelihood of repairs, it has surfaced in the Strait of Gibraltar, now a target for the very enemies it was meant to intimidate. Fuel leaks are pouring into the hold, creating a toxic and explosive environment, while the entire crew faces dire consequences. The stakes have never been higher. Will they be able to contain the catastrophe before it spirals out of control? Sources from a Russian telegram channel hint at horrors within. If the fuel ignites, the crew risks not only drowning but a deadly inferno. Imagine a world where they are unable to escape, clinging to hopes as the diesel fumes close in, sickening them slowly. Could this vessel's downfall mirror a catastrophic past like that of the Kursk disaster, hauntingly familiar? Historical references cast long shadows. The Kursk, once a pride of the Russian fleet, sank in 2000 amid fears and failures, drowning all on board. Today, history seems to echo itself as the Novorossiysk faces an uncertain future. Would Vladimir Putin, a man fierce in his quest for power, refuse any aid from NATO? As international tensions simmer, is pride now more critical than survival? As if the situation weren't dire enough, rumors slip through the cracks. A nearby Russian corvette, Vyshny Volokhyok, faces its reckoning after a collision with a civilian vessel. The previous lies about its operational state only add to the shambles of Russia's naval prowess. How could such a seemingly capable navy crumble under wave after wave of incompetence? The Novorossiysk, not a relic but a modern submarine, was commissioned just 11 years ago. It houses a wealth of weaponry and advanced capabilities, yet here it is, a pawn in a larger game, with no easy way out. Picture the weight of expectation, the lurking threat at once posed to NATO nations, now reduced to a floating embarrassment. From this spectacle, one must ask, will Putin's pride cost the lives of 52 souls aboard the Novorossiysk? History has shown that when nations clash, the waters can quickly become red. As they fight against time and their own government's failures, a thick tension hangs in the air. The clock is ticking, and the fate of a crew hangs in the balance. Can they survive the storm that is closing in fast? In a striking move earlier this year, the U.S. administration classified several Latin American cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. The White House issued a profoundly concerning declaration, stating that these cartels exert control through a reign of fear marked by assassination, terror, and violence. In many regions of Mexico, they operate almost like governments, wielding power over the daily lives of citizens. Their actions not only jeopardize American safety but also threaten regional stability and national security. Soon after this designation, President Trump authorized the U.S. military to conduct lethal operations against these cartels, transforming them from mere criminals into enemy combatants. The implications are staggering. The U.S. is prepared to take whatever action necessary to dismantle these organizations. Trump's determination to escalate this fight is palpable. A White House source remarked that if a chance arises to eliminate terrorists, the order would be given without hesitation. Another high-ranking official echoed this sentiment, stating that every possible resource will be utilized to prevent drugs from inundating the nation and to bring those responsible to justice. The situation hangs in balance. While aggressive military strikes appear increasingly possible, negotiations are reportedly ongoing between the U.S. and Venezuela, facilitated by intermediaries from the Middle East. Strikingly, Maduro has reportedly hinted at concessions he might offer to retain his control. Will these negotiations deter military intervention, or is a confrontation on the horizon? Only time will reveal the unfolding drama of these high-stakes international operations. The world watches closely as the U.S. re-evaluates its strategies against these powerful drug cartels. Can the very infrastructure that supports these organizations withstand the pressure of military might? Or will talks lead to a startling shift in alliances, with unforeseen repercussions echoing across the hemisphere? Each decision made now holds the potential to reshape the future in ways we cannot yet imagine. Previously, we saw how talks between the United States and Venezuela, brokered by Middle Eastern mediators, might open a path to easing tensions. President Maduro even hinted at some compromises to keep his hold on power amid mounting pressure. But what happens when military moves fail to shake his grip? Could diplomacy alone steer this stormy relationship toward calm? Despite bold military maneuvers, some officials from the Trump administration admit frustration. The hope for cracks in Maduro's control simply haven't appeared. This silence from the Venezuelan president has forced Washington to tread carefully, weighing every next step with caution. Could it be that Maduro's position is stronger than anyone expected? Amidst this deadlock, Maduro has surprisingly offered a lifeline, willingness to cooperate with the U.S. in targeting the brutal Tren de Aragua cartel. This shadowy network, sprawling from Venezuela across the Americas and even into Canada, deals in everything from extortion and illegal mining to kidnapping and human trafficking. For the U.S., dismantling this cartel has become a top priority, with dozens of arrests of cartel-linked Venezuelans taking place in recent years. Intriguingly, reports say Maduro made this offer in September to U.S. envoy Rick Grenell. He even wrote a direct letter to President Trump, denying claims that Venezuela fuels the U.S. drug crisis. Maduro urged for constructive dialogue to cool the rising tensions. But knowing his past claims about the U.S. empire trying to topple his regime, can his words be trusted? This brings a powerful question to mind: can trust be rebuilt between two nations where suspicion runs deep? Or is Maduro's gesture simply a strategic move wrapped in diplomacy, hiding a far different agenda? As talks continue, we watch, and wonder, if this uneasy dance can shift the tide. What lurks behind the promises of peace? The answers remain hanging in the balance, with every step potentially reshaping the future of U.S.-Venezuela relations. In the midst of escalating tensions, Venezuela stands poised for a potential conflict, embroiling its citizens in a maelstrom of fear and fervor. The U.S. government has been unequivocal in its position on the Venezuelan regime, with White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt branding it as a narco-terror cartel. She declares that Nicolas Maduro is not a legitimate president, but rather a fugitive, facing indictments in the United States for allegedly trafficking drugs. Faced with this damning characterization, discussion seems futile. But is it possible that military intervention is the only remaining option? The Venezuelan government appears to think so, ramping up its preparations for combat. Recruitment drills fill the streets as citizens are urged to enlist and defend their homeland. An alarming number of older citizens, thrust into action, trade their daily lives for combat uniforms, often for the first time learning how to fire weapons. Yet, despite their inexperience, they are ready to fight. Francisco Ojeda, a 69-year-old new recruit, expresses a haunting resolve: "If I have to lay down my life in battle, I'll do it." His determination echoes the sentiments of many others, who stand by their government, fueled by a potent mix of loyalty and a deep-seated fear of invasion. Could the very sentiment that unites them ultimately lead to tragedy? Sweat drips from brows, the tension mounts. The stakes have never been higher. As this situation unfolds, one must wonder, will these untrained militia members truly be able to stand against a well-prepared and professional military force? As whispers of war hover over the nation, the potential for catastrophe looms large. Can those untrained hands carry the weight of a country's future? The last chapter left us with the stirring pledge of Venezuelan militia volunteers, ready to risk everything for their homeland. Men and women, some well past retirement age, clutching rifles with unshakable resolve, stand prepared to face any threat. But beneath this fierce patriotism lurks a chilling reality few dare to confront. Take 67-year-old Gladys Rodriguez, who declared defiantly, "We won't let any foreign government invade." Yet, is sheer willpower enough when many militia members lack even basic training? Political experts warn that these civilians are little more than pawns in a much darker game. Benigno Alarcón, a political analyst from Andrés Bello Catholic University, exposes a brutal strategy behind this mass recruitment. According to him, the government aims to craft a human shield, a sprawling web of ordinary citizens thrown into harm's way to protect those in power. Imagine the implications: thousands of unarmed or poorly trained civilians thrust into the crossfire. Maduro's reported figure of 8 million enrolled militia might be inflated, but there is no doubt that vast swathes of the population are being mobilized. Each of them becomes a blade in the defense of a regime willing to sacrifice its own people. Could this strategy be the reason the United States hesitates to send troops into Venezuela? Despite having thousands of Marines and sailors ready for deployment, the risk of igniting brutal clashes with these militias deters any immediate ground operation. The streets echo with nervous anticipation, the scent of tension thick in the air, as both sides calculate their next moves, knowing the cost of misstep could be catastrophic. Will this fragile balance hold, or will Venezuela become a powder keg that explodes into wider conflict? The answer remains shrouded in uncertainty, as ordinary people find themselves caught in a deadly game they never asked to play. In a world of uncertainty, the gambit in Venezuela becomes a pivotal chess match. The United States stands poised with thousands of Marines and sailors ready for action, their presence a formidable deterrent. Yet, the phrase "boots on the ground" carries weighty implications, hinting at potential firestorms should clashes erupt with local militias. As tension escalates, the question lingers: what will trigger the decisive move? While direct ground combat remains a daunting prospect, the likelihood of drone strikes or missile attacks emerges as a more calculated strategy. Such actions could unleash a cascade of unintended consequences, each strike reverberating through the political landscape. Venezuelan analyst Aníbal Sánchez Ismael warns, an assault on our soil would provoke fierce repercussions, from diplomatic backlash to escalating persecutions of those labeled as collaborators. The stakes are high, and the potential fallout looms large. The delicate balance could tip in two contrasting directions. A deep offensive against cartel strongholds might embolden the populace, galvanizing them to challenge President Maduro. Conversely, it might forge a united front rallying around the government, intensifying the resolve against American interference. With every maneuver, the risks multiply. The U.S. military stands ready, equipped with the hardware and personnel necessary to escalate the situation. In this tense atmosphere, President Trump has focused his sights on dismantling the drug cartels that poison both nations. The previous administration laid groundwork as far back as 2020, indicting Maduro for drug trafficking. The stakes have no doubt risen, with a staggering $50 million reward placed on the Venezuelan leader's head, sending a clear signal: the U.S. is determined to ignite change. As positions harden, a critical juncture draws near. Will the actions taken resonate as a powerful blow against the cartels or ignite a broader conflict? Only time will tell, but the pieces are ominously set for a dramatic showdown in the streets of Venezuela. How will this game unfold? Will it culminate in liberation or escalation? The world watches, breath held, as the narrative of a nation hangs in the balance. As Russia boasts around 65 submarines, it positions itself as a dominant underwater menace. The Kremlin wields this power as a tool of intimidation, knowing others tremble at the thought of a nuclear-capable submarine lurking in the abyss. However, what occurs when that force crumbles? That's what Russia just learned the hard way. In a twist of misfortune, Vladimir Putin faced another bout of humiliation as one of his submarines faltered dangerously close to NATO waters. On September 28, a shocking revelation emerged when the Economic Times reported a critical breakdown of a Kilo-class diesel-electric submarine, the Novorossiysk. Deployed on combat tasks in the Mediterranean, its mission sank when a severe malfunction left it adrift and vulnerable. This isn't just any technical issue. Officials disclosed a significant fuel leak, creating an alarming scenario where the submarine risks an explosion, along with the lives of its 52 crew members. Worse still, repairs are off the table. The Economic Times detailed that it surfaced in the Strait of Gibraltar, effectively becoming a sitting duck. The lack of skilled personnel aboard, coupled with the absence of necessary spare parts, means time is ticking down for the Novorossiysk. Every second counts as Russia scrambles to prevent disaster from unfolding in the Mediterranean, just a stone's throw from NATO nations. New insights from the Russian Telegram channel VCHKOGPU indicate the situation is dire. Fuel is leaking directly into the hold, with a storm of potential dangers. The rising diesel levels inside create an invisible but suffocating threat to the crew. As they remain contained within, smoke-filled air could spell disaster long before any flames ignite. If failure occurs anywhere in their monitoring, the Novorossiysk could transform into a blazing inferno. Major catastrophes like this evoke uncomfortable echoes of past naval failures. The Kursk disaster from 2000, where 118 sailors lost their lives, looms large in Russian memory. Back then, international aid was spurned by Putin, fueled by fears over national security secrets. But could history repeat itself with the Novorossiysk stranded, facing imminent ruin? The chilling specter of refusal may leave the crew with no salvation. Could this situation deteriorate not only into embarrassment for Russia but lead to a callous loss of life? With NATO forces observing intently, the Novorossiysk's fate could signal a shift in perceptions and power dynamics in the region. As whispers of artillery strike targets linger in the air, will the tide of conflict rise higher? This underwater drama is unfolding in real time, with questions that keep us on the edge of our seats. As we await developments, the world watches closely, wondering just how deep Russia's naval woes will plunge. Previously, we explored how military intelligence has mapped out key cartel locations across Venezuela. With targets lined up, the stage is set for a powerful strike that could reshape the drug war. But what happens when a single command unleashes hell from the skies? Could this be the turning point in the relentless battle to stop poison from flooding American streets? Imagine the chaos unfolding in mere seconds. Drones and long-range missiles rain down on hidden drug labs, warehouses, and caravan convoys. In a blink, entire smuggling networks could vanish, delivering a staggering blow not only in Venezuela but reverberating all throughout Latin America. Traffickers in remote jungles or coastal docks might suddenly find themselves staring down the barrel, wondering if they'll be next. Yet, even though drug trafficking is a hydra-headed beast, seemingly impossible to kill, decisive action in the immediate future could drastically slow the rising tide of fentanyl and deadly narcotics sweeping into America's cities. This is not just theory. Officials are already noting a sharp decline in drug boats compared to just weeks ago. The message is clear: the tide can be pushed back. Secretary Rubio bluntly puts it, traditional interception hasn't dented the problem. The cartels have vast resources, they write off lost shipments like dust in the wind. What breaks them isn't losing one boat or another. It's the chilling certainty that the journey itself will be stopped before it begins. Imagine the desperation setting in when traffickers realize they face an invisible force, ready to obliterate their operations with ruthless precision. This is the stark reality that the Trump administration is confronting head-on. The flood of drugs is not just a criminal problem, it's an existential threat on par with a military attack on American soil. The stakes couldn't be higher. Failure means allowing poison into neighborhoods that have seen enough pain. Success means shutting down arteries that fuel addiction and death across the nation. But here's the twist no one anticipated: as the military tightens its grip, the cartels are not just flinching. Reports show a dramatic drop in illegal shipments lately. Is this a sign the strategy is finally breaking the smuggling cycles, or merely a dangerous lull before traffickers adapt and fight back harder than ever? Either way, what happens next could define the future. Will a flood of drone strikes and missile barrages stem the tide, or will this battlefield explosion unleash even darker chaos? The answer lies just beyond the horizon, where the fight for America's soul continues. In a striking maneuver, the U.S. government has laid down a clear warning: it will no longer tolerate the flood of deadly narcotics seeping into its borders. These drugs, which have claimed countless lives, demand decisive action. The past strategies have proved ineffective, but in recent weeks, the tide has begun to turn. Fewer drug-laden vessels are appearing on the radar, signaling a significant shift in operations. The call for action echoes louder than ever. If that involves drone strikes or even military interventions in South America, as the president insists, then so be it. Such measures will undoubtedly have repercussions for Nicolas Maduro and his regime. Reports suggest Maduro and his administration have forged strong ties with drug cartels, creating a precarious situation. Should these cartels start facing military retaliation, the implications could be dire for Maduro himself. Would the cartels decide his leadership is no longer viable? This scenario could trigger a coup or even a broader rebellion, resulting in a power vacuum filled by someone more aligned with U.S. interests. The stakes have never been higher. The coming weeks are poised to erupt, sending shockwaves through Venezuela's criminal networks and their allies. The lingering question remains: when and where will the U.S. military make its move? Keep up with this unfolding drama, as we delve into how past provocations, like Venezuela's threats against U.S. naval forces, have laid the groundwork for a potential clash. Stay informed and ready, as the situation is rapidly evolving, and the first strike could come at any moment. In a world where power is measured by the strength of its armada, Russia boasts approximately 65 submarines that lurk in the depths, poised to intimidate. This arsenal is meant to cast a menacing shadow across the seas, especially towards NATO. However, a glaring weakness has emerged, one that exposes the fragile state of Russia's naval capabilities. On September 28, the alarm was sounded when a Russian submarine, the Novorossiysk, broke down in the Mediterranean, shattering the illusion of invincibility. Imagine this colossal vessel, part of Russia's Black Sea Fleet, assigned to carry out duties shrouded in mystery. Suddenly, it becomes a stationary target, facing a catastrophic technical failure. An ominous fuel leak threatens its existence. The submarine, measuring over 200 feet, is now a ticking time bomb for its crew of 52. Repairs are impossible, there are no qualified technicians on board, and vital resources are lacking. As the Novorossiysk floats aimlessly, its fate hangs precariously in the balance. Could it explode? The crew's choice be bleak: they must act quickly to avert disaster. What if the damage turns dire with the looming threat of igniting diesel fumes? The very design that once represented strength has transformed into a hazardous trap. In a twist of fate, the vessel surfaced in the Strait of Gibraltar, a region watched intently by NATO. Imagine the glances across war rooms filled with surprise and disdain. A submarine, meant to strike fear, now radiates desperation instead. Could anyone have envisioned that the Novorossiysk would face such humiliation just months after flexing its muscles near the English Channel? The consequences of this malfunction echo beyond immediate danger, they resonate with echoes of the past. Remember the Kursk disaster? In 2000, that tragedy was marked by negligence and a refusal to accept foreign aid. Will history repeat itself? Vladimir Putin, so stubborn in pride, might refuse assistance once again, leaving the Novorossiysk's crew to grapple with the impending doom alone. The situation is compounded with a series of naval misfortunes plaguing Russia. Recent reports reveal a corvette, the Vyshny Volokhyok, has also suffered grievous damage after colliding with a civilian tanker. It becomes apparent that the Russian fleet is not only struggling against adversaries but also against its own diminishing capabilities. What secrets lie in the hull of the Novorossiysk? Is it merely a reflection of the broader decay of the Russian Navy? As the waves lap at its sides, and the diesel fumes waft through the air, one question looms: will this submarine become another emblem of an empire's faltering strength, consumed by its shortcomings? The Novorossiysk struggle is a reminder that beneath the surface, grand illusions often hide deep-seated vulnerabilities, waiting to be exposed in the harsh light of reality. Will it resurface a steadfast symbol of power, or succumb to the waters, lost to the elements? The clock is ticking. Previously, we saw images revealing the harsh reality behind Russia's once feared naval power, a symbol of strength now visibly crumbling under relentless sanctions and neglect. A Yazan M-class nuclear submarine, Kazan, limped into Havana, showing clear signs of decay that raised serious alarm bells about Russia's naval upkeep. Now, let's take a closer look at what those haunting pictures revealed. Shared by Marin Marcus, a consultant from the IT firm Capgemini, these snapshots depicted a vessel literally falling apart. Strange noises must echo beneath the seas, as soundproofing panels, the very shields meant to cloak the submarine's stealth, were peeling off. Without them, Kazan's once silent profile would be screaming loudly on enemy sonar, exposing its every move. Marcus warned, this sub had better make it home fast, or risk meeting the same tragic fate as the ill-fated Kursk. What must the inside look like if the hull is coming undone? Divers tried to patch up the damage, an exercise familiar to Western navies as well. Panels peel from the relentless cycle of pressure changes that squeeze and release the hull with every dive and ascent. But the problems ran deeper. Commissioned in 2001, Kazan had spent 6 years cruising the seas. If its exterior could degrade so quickly, it hinted at something more troubling: a systemic failure in Russian submarine manufacturing and maintenance. Despite these flaws, the Kremlin boasted Kazan's voyage to Cuba as a show of strength. Official voices downplayed the panel losses, insisting operational abilities remained intact. Yet experts saw this as concrete evidence of deeper rot, proof that even Russia's best struggled to keep pace. Could such neglect be the shadow hanging over Novorossiysk's current crisis? When even a flagship like Kazan shows signs of disintegration, what hope remains for the rest of the fleet? More troubling still, recent reports reveal that these challenges aren't limited to submarines alone. Russia's mighty naval power appears to be unraveling in the open, and no amount of bravado can mask the relentless tide of decay creeping through its vessels. What disasters lie ahead as these cracks widen? The unfolding story promises shocking revelations. What if a nation's most powerful weapon suddenly became a ticking time bomb? Imagine the chilling silence surrounding a massive submarine, once a source of intimidation and might, now incapacitated and vulnerable. This is the unsettling reality facing Russia's naval pride, the Kilo-class submarine Novorossiysk, which has recently met with disaster in the Mediterranean. On September 28, reports broke that the Novorossiysk, part of Russia's Black Sea Fleet, had suffered a catastrophic breakdown while on duty. What once patrolled the depths of enemy waters is now dead in the water, a ghost of its shadowy former self. But the situation is more dire than mere mechanical failure. The submarine is facing a colossal fuel leak that could spell disaster for its crew of 52. If it isn't resolved swiftly, a catastrophic explosion may seal the fate of both the vessel and its personnel. The stakes have never been higher. News outlets indicate that the submarine has surfaced awkwardly in the Strait of Gibraltar, and it appears no one aboard possesses the expertise or tools to carry out the essential repairs. As the clock ticks, Russia must act fast to rescue its pride from sinking without a trace. Could this be the final act in a tragic play of military hubris? According to sources from the Russian telegram channel VCHKOGPU, the situation is even graver than initially feared. Fuel is now leaking dangerously into the submarine's holds, creating a volatile environment. The echo of this predicament resonates eerily with past tragedies, making us wonder, could history be on the verge of repeating itself? As diesel fumes fill the cramped quarters, crew members face health risks that could kill them long before the vessel ever sinks. The toxic air becomes a deadly foe, where each breath grows heavier with potential despair. There's a ticking clock now. If the leak cannot be contained, the Novorossiysk won't just succumb to mechanical failure, it could igniting an inferno that nothing on board can extinguish. But wait. The crew's predicament is compounded by the explosive hazard of excessive fuel in the hold. Leaking fuel must be pumped out, but that action risks igniting an uncontrollable flame. Amidst this chaos stands a crucial question: what will unfold next? The environmental repercussions loom large, yet they pale in comparison to the immediate threat to life aboard the beleaguered submarine. As the Mediterranean Sea watches silently, this situation morphs into a horrific spectacle of naval failure. The Novorossiysk, meant to intimidate and assert dominance, instead faces dishonor, drifting within reach of NATO nations. How will Russia respond to this grievous faux pas, and can they stave off an utter catastrophe? Worryingly, this isn't the first time Russia's underwater fleet has found itself in turmoil. Echoes of the Kursk disaster haunt the shadows, reminding us of the perils lurking beneath the surface. With that haunting memory fresh in our minds, it begs the question, will history repeat itself, or will the ghosts of the past compel a new course of action? As the crisis unfolds, the crew's chances grow slimmer against the backdrop of a military regime unwilling to seek assistance from the West. The indignity of being rescued by alleged enemies casts a long shadow on any hope for survival. In a world where pride stands at the forefront, could this lead to yet another tragedy at sea, forever marking Russia's maritime legacy as one of failure? The Novorossiysk floats on the brink of disaster, and the outcome remains uncertain. Will ruin reign over honor?